17 days until the Australian federal election in 2025. Currently, there is a lot of polling for this election. However, all of these are different and have different results. This video will fix this by giving an average result for all MRPs in this little electorate map. So this video will serve as a general guide on a lot of what MRPs have as an opinion on the electorates. Welcome to the Australian election according to the MRP average. So for our first example, the seat of Solomon, they're currently looking at a 58.5% movement towards Labour, which is a plus 8.5 on the two-party preferred. So that is above 5, but less than 10. But from here we can see that the amount is going to be that they have less than 40% on their two-party preferred over here. That's mainly because the Greens is kind of eating up a lot of those, but there's also a large vote from One Nation and whatnot as well, which can be also eating up into those. Like 25% from other candidates is pretty decently huge. And that sort of shows that the average is not going to be above 40% for Labour there, so it's going to be at 4 clicks here. And of course, we see from here that Lingiari, we're going to do that at the end of the video. We're going to do most of these at the end of the video. So they're going to be swing seats in that situation. I'll just speed through all of the all of the seats until the swing seats, and then we'll just get right through. Of course, you can tell the capital of most countries will often work towards their center-left most of the time, and that completely works with Australia, as it does with America. ACT is going to be entirely heavily Labour in this election, and the MRPs say that it is too. So here's Tasmania. Tasmania has got some pretty decent positions here. Of course, there's 2 swing seats in Tasmania from this one. There's 1 Liberal seat in Braddon, which is Bridget Archer's seat, so that's a popular sort of Liberal there. And then there's Franklin, which is likely to go to Labour in this one. This one actually has Braddon more Liberal than Franklin is Labour, because of how good the primary votes are. So I can sort of see that the Bridget Archer is doing quite well with the populace in the first preferences, whereas like it is very possible that like it could be just like Greens versus Liberals in Franklin, for example, which would be interesting, but it's probably not going to happen. But it's still like it still sort of shows that it could happen under 40%. You sort of run that risk. Okay, so there is a few irregularities with this map of South Australia in comparison to a lot of political pundits' opinions on what South Australia looks like. Firstly, Tony Payson has the seat of Barker very safe, which is kind of different to what a lot of pundits would say. They'd say maybe a bit less safe than that. But the second one, and the most important one, is the seat of Hindmarsh. Hindmarsh is actually a swing seat in this election, because it is within the margin of error for these kinds of polls. If there is a heavy error in these polls, then Hindmarsh could be a surprise seat that could flip, which is crazy, but It's true. There is now that sort of green pocket in Queensland and Leichhardt, which is a very traditional swing seat. So it's nice seeing those three sort of those three and this one sort of working together, kind of, I guess. But yeah, still, the Maranoa is of course the safest seat in the country, so it's very normal to see that. But things that are weird to see, there isn't really much. This is a normal Queensland map. Of course, Dixon is likely to go to its holder because that holder is now running for Prime Minister. Usually you have a little bit more popularity when you're running for Prime Minister in a in a seat. It isn't a tried and true rule, but it is pretty darn close. Okay, so Perth, Western Australia is looking still very good for Labor. Of course, Pearce is very heavily is floor red, so it is. So that's a pretty decent block from the coalition in Western Australia. Of course, that can be attributed to their premier, Roger Cook, being very popular. And there are, of course, 4 swing states, only 4 in Western Australia. That would be Bullwinkle, Curtin, which is between the Liberal and the Independent, Tagny, and Moore. So yeah, there are quite a few. So there are 4 swing seats in Western Australia. So yeah. Also, this time is when I noticed that Western Australia was actually smaller than Queensland. Queensland is larger than Western Australia. But I didn't know that at the time, so I did Queensland first and then Western Australia. Oopsies. Okay, so the Victorian election isn't looking so good for anyone at the moment. The mortgage belt is currently looking the best for the Libs because they've already got Aston, and and I've looked at they look more so ahead in those like sort of in the mortgage belt just in general. So, but the Liberals don't look so good at all in Wannon, where there's a Teal Independent coming up, and in those sort of coastal areas, even Kooyong, where the Teals are looking pretty decent. But like as in swing seats wise, there is a lot of unexpected swing seats, so it is looking pretty decent for like anyone who the party who's beating the MRPs, definitely who might beat the MRPs to have their own sort of basically make the election theirs in this state. Yeah. But yeah, it's sort of looking quite well in West Melbourne and in sort of rural Victoria for swing states wise. There's a lot of surprises in like how the margins are as well. Like Willis is a Labor seat, but it's within 5 points. So it's a floor seat, but which means they kind of have to win Willis if they want to win the election at all. But it's like, yeah, it's if this is right, then they kind of have to, but it isn't really. New South Wales is similar, but quite different from what MRPs by themselves say and what other sort of pundits have exclaimed about New South Wales. Specifically the China Belt is still pretty through and through, but it's within the northern areas of Sydney, and it's it's much more broad than some would expect. It includes seats like Mackellar and Greenway, which are considered to be somewhat safe or somewhat less contentious. Furthermore, there are a lot of rural swing seats in this area coming into the election. Of course, in Monaro is a swing seat coming into this election. according to the average of the MRPs. And Hunter is, of course, a well-discussed one, but it's going to be a little more tricksy coming into... it's going to be much more so. Of course, as well as that, you know, you've got Cowper and whatnot, and yeah, but there's New South Wales has a lot more swing seats than the rest of the states, I'd argue. From what I've looked at the rest of the states, it ended up bringing the amount of swing seats up to 41, which means that the Libs are on 50, Labour is on 51, there are 6 independents and other parties in the government. There is Katter has a seat, and the Greens also have a seat in Melbourne. Yeah, so now it is time to unmask all of the swing seats from east to west based on the average of all the MRPs. First on the list will be Cowper. Kaz Heiss will win the seat of Cowper by 1.1% according to this model. So that's... that is a very marginal amount. That's tilt margin. In the seat of Patterson, the incumbent Meryl Swanson will lose to Lawrence Antcliffe by 2% or more-ish. So where's that again? Oh, over here. 1, 2. Emma McBride will win DeBell with a more than 1% majority. Sophie Stamps will retain her seat of McKellar by a lean margin. Jeremy Neal will have a very good time in Leichhardt. Not a very good time. He's going to be in a swing seat, but it's going to pay off in a lean margin in this situation. Eden Monaro is going to be a pretty decent Labour seat for... Mike Freelander will hold MacArthur by a pretty decent margin of 51.9 on the two-party preferred. Macquarie will be won by Labour by a pretty decent amount in comparison to Hunter. Macquarie will be around 2%, and Hunter will be under 1%, giving it the first slog margin of this video. Greenway will go to Michelle Rowland by around 2 points-ish. Around. This prediction has Elizabeth Watson-Brown winning in Ryan, the incumbent Green, in for around 2% of the one seat that does look like flipping in Queensland is going to be Brisbane, with Labour's candidate Donna Jarrett winning by 2% around on the two-party preferred. Bass and Lyon are both going to Liberals Susie Bauer and Bridget Archer by relatively lean margins. Of course, Labour and independent parties look like they're very positive in holding these according to the polls. Of course, Bruce is a lean Labour. Dunkley is a tilt, and so is Goldstein. Rural Victoria looks quite successful for the Liberals. of course, Labour will win the seat of Corangamite by a lean margin, just below 3.5%, which is the threshold I used for swing and safe. Swing and, and holding. Wannon and McEwen have similar margins. Casey also has... McEwen, I think, is a slog margin. And Casey is... Yeah. There's my memory. In Lingiari, Marion Screamore will win by slightly more than a point. The seats in South Australia don't look that marginal, even though there are a few marginal seats. Most of them are within that sort of 2% threshold, where it doesn't really count that much. The Liberals get Sturt to a lean margin. And Labour ends up with Boothby and Hindmarsh to a lean margin. Other than that, it's looking pretty lackluster. I mean, it is lackluster in South Australia. It's a state that I live in, but I know that it's relatively... ever since SA Best, not really much has happened. So at this point of the election, if we saw this on the night, it'd probably be a Peter Dutton phone call to Anthony Albanese to say that he's lost, because Peter Dutton has only got 59 seats and there is 12 swing seats, meaning that he can only get a maximum of 71 seats, whereas Labour needs around half of those swing seats to have a minority government, basically. And if they get more than that, to get 76, you'd need around 10 of those 12. So Labour is still in the running here, but the Libs aren't. So let's see if they get to hold majority government or minority government by looking at the 3 swing areas. Of course, those are the China Belt, the Mortgage Belt, and the Western Australian Belt. I don't know what we'd call this, and the Western Australian swing states. Werra kind of confirms Labour's lead over the coalition in this scenario. Werra is going to be called in a slog margin, meaning that realistically this will take a week to confirm or deny. The Liberals are ahead in Perth and related area regional seats, but by very small amounts. So in Curtin specifically is a slug margin, is a slugged margin. Bullwinkle is similarly gone. We won't know the answers for this in weeks. And Moore is not slugged, but it is lean. Tangney is similarly lean, but for Labour. In this situation, the Liberal Party does make a small gain in Bennelong with a lean margin, but Labour is able to defend the rest. Reid also gets a lean margin, and Parramatta gets a tilt margin. Now, Kooyong is actually closer to safety for its independent than Goldstein is. Kooyong has a lean margin. But the rest of the mortgage belt seats are actually going to the Liberal Party, with Deacon, Menzies with a tilt margin, and Chisholm with a slog margin. Oh, right here. So in this situation is the Libs with 66, Liberals with 66, Laborals with 70, and various crossbenchers with 14. Of course, the Liberals are the only party that actually gained stuff in this election, but they're still they're obviously unable to really form government. Labour would likely form government, something along the lines of a minority government with supply and support from the Greens, or some of those more left-wing independents from Teal Climate 200. There's obviously a lot of divergencies that are from this. Obviously, a lot more sort of swingish states, a lot less comfortable seats for Labour than there are for the Libs in this situation. So it could definitely fall either way from that one, and that's why I have the swing seat map, just to show how broad the seats are in this election, and how much your vote actually counts. So it is always worth going out and voting.